dysfunctional relationship to be fractured by the bad behavior of the migrant caravan. They are doing things out of law. We are affected at the border crossing. Many Tijuanans. Is that right, Sandra? First time I've heard that. They work, study, and visit the United States in healthy peace. Doug McElway is live from the White House with more. Hey, Doug, good morning there.
Morning, Bill. And this marks a real moment of truth for the Trump administration, which promised repeatedly during the campaign and during the first 2 years of the administration to crack down hard on illegal immigration. And it appears to be doing just that, as this first of the Central American caravans is now stalled just outside of Tijuana and the U.S. point of entry at San Ysidro. Department of Homeland Security sources tell Fox News that about 50 migrants broke through the border and were apprehended. That following a tense stay near Tijuana as Border Patrol agents fired tear gas into crowds that were throwing rocks and bottles at them and trying to cut through the concertina wire to get through. This morning, President Trump tweeted, quote, Mexico should move the flag-waving migrants, many of whom are stone-cold criminals, back to their countries. Do it by plane, do it by bus, do it any way you want, but they are not coming into the USA. We will close the border permanently if need be. Congress fund the wall. Mexico is also growing increasingly frustrated with the caravans, irrespective of Mr. Trump's tweets. Yesterday, its interior minister said that it would immediately deport those who tried to violently enter the U.S. from Tijuana. It is also, according to the Associated Press, vowing to bolster security on its side of the border after a protest turned violent yesterday, resulting in the arrest of 39 people. The skirmish is also vowed to be a source of focus here in Washington, with Democrats poised to take over the House of Representatives in January. Listen to the comments from the man who promises to be the next chairman of the House Oversight Committee.
They should be allowed to come in, seek asylum. That's the law. We have a system that has worked for a long time. This president has come in, wants to change it. That's up to him. But now the Congress has got to stand up.
Meanwhile, DHS Secretary Nielsen, who has been rumored to be leaving her post under sometimes intense criticism from the president for her lack of toughness on border security issues, took a really tough line yesterday in a statement that said, quote, DHS will not tolerate this type of lawlessness and will not hesitate to shut down ports of entry for security and public safety reasons. She added that any lawbreakers in these caravans, whether it's defacing government property, attacking Border Patrol agents, or just breaking through, will be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. Bill, back to you.
More to come on that. Doug McElway from the North Lawn. Thank you, sir.
Meanwhile, back on Capitol Hill, new developments unfolding after former Attorney General Loretta Lynch and former FBI Director James Comey are both issued subpoenas to testify behind closed doors. Comey pushing back, saying he wants to testify, but only in public. Last hour, we spoke to Congressman Mike Johnson, who sits on the Judiciary Committee.
I don't know whether we're going to do it in open or closed session, but I do think we need our questions answered. We've been at this for a long time. As you know, Bill, the House Judiciary Committee, the House Oversight Committee have had joint investigations ongoing for many, many months. And we have as many questions now as we have answers.
Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel is live on Capitol Hill for us this morning. So, Mike, what more is Congressman Trey Gowdy saying about having these former officials testify?
Well, Sandra, Bill, good morning to you. The retiring House Oversight Chairman is proposing a middle ground option, not a high-profile, made-for-TV open hearing and not a closed-door interview, something the public would eventually get to see.
Leaks are counterproductive, whether Jim Comey's doing it, whether the FBI is doing it, or whether Congress is doing it. The remedy for leaks is not to have a public hearing where you are supposed to ask about 17 months' worth of work in 5 minutes. I think the remedy is to videotape the deposition, videotape the transcribed interview.
James Comey's reaction to the subpoena came on Twitter. Happy Thanksgiving. Got a subpoena from House Republicans. I'm still happy to sit in the light and answer all questions, but I will resist a closed-door thing because I've seen enough of their selective leaking and distortion. Let's have a hearing, invite everyone to see. Let the negotiations begin, but time is precious with Republicans about to lose power in the House. Sandra?
Mike, and lawmakers are returning to D.C. to face a leadership vote in the House this week?
That's right, on the Democrat side, and slowly but surely you're seeing Nancy Pelosi lock up some of the critical votes she will need to become House Speaker. Congressman Stephen Lynch of Massachusetts, one of 16 Democrats who signed a letter saying he would not support Pelosi for Speaker, now says he would support her over a Republican on the House floor. But he told a local TV station in Boston he still believes Democrats should offer a new direction in their party. Another prominent Democrat says Pelosi will get this done.
If there was someone else that had that same package of talents, I'd say support them. But no one, I think, is better qualified than she is right now. There's no one I want to see more in that role. And I'm confident at the end of the day she has the votes to do it.
A big challenge for the anti-Pelosi coalition is nobody has stepped up to run against her. Sandra, Bill.
Mike Emanuel on Capitol Hill. Thank you.
I want to bring in America's A-Team. David Asman, host of Bulls and Bears on the Fox Business Network. Marianne Marsh, former senior advisor to John Kerry. And Mark Lauder, former special assistant to the president and former press secretary to Vice President Mike Pence. Hello, you three.
Good morning.
Good Monday. Our Spanish speaker says, what about Tijuana? How do you say it? Aneses.
People from Tijuana.
Let's clear it up. Thank you, David, very much. So what's going to happen there?
Well, let me just say something about the Tijuaneses. The folks from the border of Mexico in many ways have more in common with the United States than they do with Central America. I covered the region for about 12 years. I mean, they rely on commerce with the United States, not with Central America. They, unlike the people that invade the U.S. border, they travel to and from the United States quite frequently. So they really do view these Central Americans as a problem. Some are calling them invaders. They're taking their housing, they're taking their food, and they are endangering their relationship with the United States. So this is a real problem. But I just have to say one thing. To see children going through what they are going through now in Mexico, being grabbed by their parents or by their guardian or whomever it is, and being used as pawns in this is child abuse. It's child abuse. And whoever encouraged these Central Americans that they'd have a free ride going into the U.S. border, those people should be in jail.
It is heartbreaking to see all of that and the use of tear gas. Obviously, you're hearing about a lot of that this morning. Carla Prova, she's the U.S. Border Patrol chief, and she weighed in this morning and responded to the use of that tear gas. Listen.
Agents were being assaulted. A large group rushed the area and they were throwing rocks and bottles at my men and women, putting them in harm's way as well as other members of the caravan. We needed to disperse the group, and with that assaultive nature, it was imperative that we disperse them from the area.
Mark?
First and foremost, we've got to protect the people who are protecting us, and that's what you see Border and Customs Patrol doing. They're protecting the people who are there on the border, guarding our points of entry. And if you're going to storm through the fences and try to climb the walls, attack our men and women who are in uniform protecting this country, they are going to defend themselves using non-lethal force. This is not new. They've used pepper spray in the past under previous administrations. This was more of a large-scale disturbance, and so they responded much like a police force would with tear gas to disperse the crowd.
Nobody wants to see it come to that.
Sorry,
right,
go ahead,
Marianne?
Sandra.
No, of course it shouldn't. But here's what I don't understand. Millions of people cross this border every single day. Yet somehow 50 to 500 people cause this uproar where you now see kids who are barefoot in diapers being tear gassed. We haven't seen that before. And this is from an administration who separates children from their parents. The legal right of these migrants is to come to our border and apply for asylum at the port of entry. And unfortunately, the Trump administration has decided, as Representative Cummings pointed out in an earlier interview, that they've changed the rules and they keep closing the port of entry. So it's a bait and switch. And they're desperate to come in.
They're trying to discourage others from doing the same thing. I think what is interesting about this wrinkle over the weekend is the reaction from the mayor in Tijuana.
Right.
And we don't hear from him often. He's none too happy with this. I think, David, based on your experience in that part of the world, how do you as a government allow migrant caravans, one after the other, to move through your country unhindered until they reach a point where a mayor in one of your biggest cities says, hold on, folks.
Well, it's
we need to figure this out.
Mexicans, if people think that our immigration policies are harsh, no matter who the president is, whether it was Obama who separated children or President Trump who separated children,
that is not true.
The fact is that Mexico, try to get through Mexico as a migrant, and you'll find that their laws are much tougher. It's so much more difficult to get a job in Mexico than it is in the United States.
But they allow these people to move through their country.
They, of course, to a certain extent, they had no choice. There was a movement behind the caravan that was a very strong movement. They had the eyes of the world on them, and they felt that they needed to get as far to the border in safety as possible. But now that they are there, and now that they're causing riots, they're causing a big headache for the Mexicans. The Mexican government is about to go through a change. On Saturday, we have a new Mexican president, and the departing president was hoping that his departure would be peaceful. This is destroying their whole government.
We got another topic to get to quickly.
But quickly, though, the Obama administration did not separate children from their parents.
They absolutely
They did it when they thought they were being trafficked.
Exactly.
Hold on. When they thought they were being trafficked, or that wasn't their parent,
Right.
and then they reestablished custody.
And that was,
the
but
Trump
that was
administration has
separating.
separated
There are many
5,000
instances,
kids.
Marianne, I can tell you from
5,000
personal
kids.
experience, there are many
I'm talking about
instances.
the
There are many
facts.
instances where children are used as pawns. They are taken by people who are not their parents, and in those situations, they should be
So
separated
you're telling me
from
all
the people who are.
5,000 kids separated by the Trump administration?
I'm telling you that
were,
these people were
pawns,
being
every
used
one of
as
them.
pawns, but for other people's purposes, because
That's not true.
they were told that they would have an easy time getting across the border. Have they had
Mark,
an easy
let
time?
Mark
Have
back
they?
in here, because Mark, bring this to the White House response now, to hear the White House doubling down on their threat to just close the southern border.
And this is what the president has said he was going to do. He was going to stop the caravan. He was going to enforce our laws as they exist. He's got the power under the law to stop this flow of immigration
He's
and even to
breaking the
change.
law.
All
He's
right.
not.
We're
The
not
law
going
allows
to
him.
settle this today.
breaking the law.
Topic number 2, Newt Gingrich on James Comey and whether or not he will respond to a subpoena. Here's the former House Speaker.
The question is what they're going to get into. It doesn't help you much if Comey says, I'd like to appear in public, and then as soon as he's in public, he says, well, I can't discuss this because it's classified. I can't discuss that. So I think it partly is a question of what the topics are going to be. As a general rule, I think it's always better to have the American people involved.
What gives here, Mark? I mean, you've got a period of, what, 30 days, perhaps, before Gowdy and Goodlatte or one or the other gets answers from Loretta Lynch and James Comey? Do you videotape it? Do you do it in public, or do you do it in private?
Well, it depends on what you want. If you want actual answers, you do it in private. If not, you're going to get a 5-minute sideshow circus and Spartacus moments from Democrats who are just trying to score political points. I think what Gowdy was saying yesterday, Congressman Gowdy, is this is the right way to do it. And since when has the subject of a subpoena, and especially a former law enforcement official and an FBI agent, got to determine how their interview is going to take place? He would have never stood for that as FBI director. Give me a break.
Marianne?
I mean, come on. I mean, he didn't feel that way when Hillary Clinton testified for 11 hours about Benghazi in front of the entire world, or Andrew McCabe, or Peter Strzok, or Rod Rosenstein. So he complains that they only have 5 minutes to answer questions. Give him 10, give him 20.
Right,
He only does it when it suits him.
Speaking of Spartacus.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. Cory Booker on the Sunday shows over the weekend. I will consider running for president. There's a shocker, Smitty. That's something that I will do. These people in New Jersey are talking to me about it, across the country that are talking to me about it, so I will consider that. So Booker was asked about it over the weekend. Klobuchar in Minnesota was asked about it. Sherrod Brown was asked about it in Ohio. Tom Steyer didn't dismiss it, and John Kasich apparently is considering as well. How big should that stage be when we get into primaries?
Well, remember how big the Republican stage was.
17.
I mean, yeah, 17 people. So honestly, I think the Democrats, in comparison to that, have narrowed it down somewhat. But it'll be interesting to see that. What interests me about Klobuchar, first of all, it's not exactly a household name. Maybe it'll become one soon. But if she likes to get things done, as she did, she said that was one of her selling points. I like to get things done. She's got to prove it over the next few months. She's got to prove that, in fact, on issues like immigration, as we were just talking about, make a deal with a wall for an immigration deal. She's got to, is she willing to make the middle-class tax cuts permanent, as a lot of Republicans want to do in exchange for something else? So if she is a person of her word and wants to get things done, she's going to have about a year to prove
Marianne, do you like what you're seeing and hearing so far about your party?
I think there's at least 22 people thinking about it. It'll be bigger than the Republican field.
Really?
Yes, but I think the problem
You've said that in the past.
Yeah, no,
yeah.
everyone's thinking about it. The problem is if you're not doing something about it right now, you're already behind. And Cory Booker, for example, is already having trouble finding really good operatives because people have already committed. Elizabeth Warren has done more legwork than anybody to prepare for this. The Obama team will be with Deval Patrick. So if you don't have your staff, you don't have your operatives, you're not ready, you can think about it, but you're not going to be successful.
And to David's point, any Democrat that works with this administration is going to lose in a primary because it's the angry radical liberal voters who are going to fill that primary and decide who gets their nomination.
It's a great panel, Smitty.
That's
didn't I
a
tell you,
fascinating
right?
for a Monday morning. You know, he sets this up. This is going to be great, he says.
During the commercial, it's going to be a great panel.
And it was. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, David.
All right, Marianne, thank you. We'll have much more on the unrest at the border and and how the U.S. should handle thousands of migrants trying to get into the country when we talk to former acting ICE Director Thomas Homan.
Looking forward to that. Also, the EU, the UK, a step closer to a deal on Brexit. So what does that look like? Nigel Farage, instrumental in that movement. He joins us live today on his reaction as to what is next and what it means here at home.
There were those who said that reaching a Brexit agreement that worked for both sides was an... The deal we have agreed today unlocks a bright future for the UK. Outside the EU, we will be able to strike new trade deals around the world and open up new markets in the world's fastest growing economies. We will be able to focus our energies on the many other important issues that matter to the British people at home.
This is a big deal now coming to a head. Prime Minister Theresa May, after the UK and leaders of the EU reached an agreement, apparently, on the terms of Brexit. Still needs approval for a vote. Nigel Farage, one of the fathers of the Brexit movement, not happy with the deal. He's the former leader of the UK Independence Party and a Fox News contributor. Thanks for coming back, Nigel, and greetings to you from London. What do you think of this deal? What does it look like to you?
It looks like the worst deal in history to me. Do you know what she did yesterday, Mrs. May, was she signed up to something that is legally binding, and what it means is we give away about 60 billion sterling in return for a period of some years, during which we have to accept all EU rules, new ones as well, without having any say over how those laws are made, which is what I would call taxation without representation. We don't get back, at this stage of the game, control of our borders. We're not able, for some years, to do trade deals. And here's the worst bit. The worst bit is we will only be allowed to leave the EU's customs union if they agree to it as well. It's rather like me saying, I'm going to voluntarily put myself in prison, and when I want to leave, you will let me go, won't you? Literally, we've signed up for purgatory. It's madness. It's legally binding that we're stuck in this thing and we can't get out unless they agree. And why should they agree? So actually, what she signed up to is us indefinitely being rule takers from the European Union. Now, the one upside is if this deal's approved, we do leave the European Union legally on the 29th of March at 11 p.m. next year. The downside is what she signed us up to gives us even less sovereignty than we had as European Union members. It's a bad deal. It's the worst deal in history. And I very much hope the British Parliament votes it down.
Nigel, how do you make that case in possible consequences? How do you quantify that, and how do you think this is such a bad deal?
Well, it's a bad deal, firstly, because it gives away too much money. It's a bad deal because it traps us in something we can't leave unless the other side agrees. And it's a bad deal because it could go on for years and years and years. And it's not honouring the vote. You know, we had a referendum in this country, the greatest ever democratic exercise in the history of our nation. A majority said leave, and Mrs. May is trying to please both sides. It's sort of a half in, half out. Never, never land. It means the prospects of a trade deal between us and the USA have been kicked way, way into the future. We're not taking our opportunities, and I actually think that it's so bad that I think Parliament will vote it down, which will lead, between now and Christmas, if I'm right, to a very major crisis indeed.
Interesting. Another story regarding Facebook. This goes back to Cambridge Analytica, and just to refresh our viewers' minds, there was a fellow who worked for Cambridge Analytica, and he sent out a quiz via Facebook, right? And millions and millions of people took this quiz, and in return, he was able to capture their personal information. Later, that information was sold to whomever came to bid on that information. Facebook says this. What's the DCMS, by the way? What's that stand for?
That's our Department of Culture, Media and Sport. It's a government department in this country.
Got it. Here's the statement from Facebook, then I'll let you respond to it. The materials obtained by the DCMS committee are subject to a protective order, the San Mateo Superior Court restricting their disclosure. We have asked the DCMS committee to refrain from reviewing them and to return them to council or to Facebook. Well, what is the point of this story as it relates to the consumer that they need to understand?
Well, here's the point. The great conspiracy theory is that we won the referendum in this country because, firstly, it was all funded by the Russians. but there's no evidence of that at all. And the second conspiracy theory is the great British public were brainwashed by people like Cambridge Analytica putting out online adverts. And it's actually very interesting that our official information commissioner, he's the regulator for all of this stuff, produced a report a couple of weeks ago saying there was little evidence that Cambridge Analytica played a significant role at all. This is all the establishment doing their best to do down Brexit. You know, the European Union is the epicenter of the globalists' project, and they're not taking Brexit lying down.
Very interesting. Nigel Farage weighing in on all of that for us. By the way, what do you, based on everything you just said on the Facebook response, what do you think the future is of the company and leadership there?
Well, I met Mr. Zuckerberg a few months ago in the European Parliament. I challenged him directly, and I think, I must say, firstly, they should now be classified as publishers because they're not a platform for all ideas. But I'll make a prediction. Sir Nick Clegg, the former Deputy Prime Minister to David Cameron, whose leadership period led to the demise of the Liberal Democrats, whose prominent role for Remain in the referendum led to Leave winning, if he's now head of Facebook's global affairs, given his track record, I think I'll sell my shares in Facebook.
All right, we'll see where it all goes. Nigel Farage, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
All right. Well, the nation's busiest border crossing is back open after it was temporarily closed when hundreds of migrants rushed the border there. Former acting ICE Director Tom Homan will join us next on all of that.
Also, big story developing from overseas and here at home. An emergency session of the UN after Russia fires on a U.S. ally east of 3 warships captured by Russia on Sunday off the coast of Crimea, prompting an emergency meeting by the UN Security Council. That will happen in about 30 minutes. Trey Yanks is watching that from our Middle East Bureau to bring us up to date on what we need to know. Trey?
Bill, the UN Security Council will hold that emergency meeting in about half an hour to discuss the latest escalation in the Sea of Azov that did leave 3 Ukrainian vessels captured by the Russian Navy. The exchange of fire began after a Russian ship rammed a Ukrainian tugboat near the Kerch Strait yesterday. Following the incident, the Ukrainian and Russian boats exchanged fire, leaving at least 6 Ukrainian sailors injured. Now, Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko is calling for the introduction of martial law in Ukraine that would increase the country's defense capabilities and allow for postponed elections. The Ukrainian parliament is set to vote on this proposal later today. This as Poroshenko spoke directly to Russian leadership, demanding the release of 23 sailors currently being detained by Russia following Sunday's maritime clash. As for the Russian response, the country's foreign minister Sergei Lavrov blamed Ukraine for the event, saying that Russia isn't concerned about international sanctions as punishment for open firing on a Ukrainian vessel. Early Monday, Russian state media warned Ukraine of consequences for Sunday's clash and called actions that they took on Sunday in an attempt to provoke conflict. Now, Bill, we have not heard yet from the U.S. State Department or the White House about this clash between Russia and Ukraine, but the White House has indicated to Fox News that President Trump has been briefed on the situation. Bill?
Thank you, Trey. Trey Yanks watching that from overseas. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Trey. Fox News alert on the crisis at the border. President Trump threatening a permanent border shutdown after yesterday's chaotic scene forced the nation's busiest border crossing to shut down temporarily. The president tweeting Mexico should move the flag, waving migrants, many of whom are stone-cold criminals, back to their countries. Do it by plane, do it by bus, do it any way you want, but they are not coming into the USA. We will close the border permanently if need be. Congress, fund the wall. Today's headliner, Thomas Homan, former acting ICE director and a Fox News contributor. Tom, good morning to you. First of all, how do you think the White House is handling the situation at the border?
Absolutely perfectly. What the president's tweet is right on target. You know, Mexico needs to step up and take some action or shut the border down. Shutting the border down is going to hurt Mexico a lot more than it's going to hurt this country.
Wow.
It's heartbreaking, you know, over the holiday weekend, seeing these images of families and children being dragged across, some of them not wearing shoes. I mean, nobody wants to see that, Thomas. I mean, there's heartache when you see those pictures. There's the rule of law the president continues to hammer down on. How do you address both?
Well, first of all, I've said many times, I certainly feel bad for the plight of these people. but they're not asylum. They're not true asylum seekers. They don't qualify under existing law to claim asylum because they want to come here. You've seen them, they're carrying signs, I want a job. That doesn't qualify for asylum, so I certainly understand the plight of these people. I can certainly understand them want to be a part of this country, but there's a legal way to do it, and they're not following the legal process. They're using the asylum system, which harms real true asylum seekers that really are escaping fear and persecution. But on your first point about the women and children escaping tear gas, we got to look at the facts here. A minority of this caravan, a small minority, is actually family members, women and children. Most of them are adult males. But the media, some of the media out there are getting shots of the women and children to try to pull at the heartstrings of America. And, you know, and even the caravan itself, the people that are coordinating this whole event, they'll put the women and children up front to make it seem like this is 5,000 women and children when it's not. They're playing the game. Some of the media outlets are playing the game. This is a vast majority of males seeking employment in the United States, not women and children.
Tom, I want you to listen carefully. This is Amy Klobuchar, Democratic senator from the state of Minnesota. She was asked about it on the Sunday shows. Yeah, the Klobuchar, bite number 2, guys, sound bite number 2. Here she is talking about the weaponization, she believes, of the administration's policy on immigration.
Secondly, comprehensive immigration reform. He has gut-punched us on that a number of times. We have the will to put the money at the border for better security and combine it with some sensible reforms, including things like a path to citizenship. He has chosen instead to weaponize this, to politicize it. And I just think it's wrong for our economy, and it is also wrong for our work with the rest of the world.
Well, she says a lot in that statement, pretty much puts it in the president's lap, sir.
Well, I hear the talk, but where's the walk? I mean, I worked with Congress. I was the acting director for a year and a half when I came back from retirement, and I was up on the Hill many times. The Democrats are the ones pushing sanctuary cities, which is going to entice people to come to this country. The Democrats were the ones that were talking about abolishing ICE, which entices more people to come to this country illegally. I've been up on Hill numerous times, so has the Secretary Nielsen up on the Hill, asking Congress to close the loopholes, which they wouldn't do. There would not be a caravan today if they would have closed the loopholes on Florida's settlement agreement about detaining families or raised the bar for asylum. If they would have took the necessary steps they needed to take, we wouldn't have a caravan. So if she wants to blame somebody for the current situation, she needs to look in the mirror.
You know, earlier we heard from Carla Provost. She's U.S. Border Patrol chief, and she was talking about the decision to use tear gas. And she was defending that decision, saying that these groups rushed the area. They were throwing rocks and bottles at the men and women on the border. What more are you hearing? What more can you tell us about the interaction and the confrontation at the border, Tom?
First of all, Carla Provost is a great chief. She's an American patriot. I saw that interview. She's exactly right. You know, that was an appropriate law enforcement response to a serious situation going on in the border. I mean, agents were being assaulted, and they need to protect themselves. I mean, these men and women stand in that line every day and defend this nation, and they need to protect themselves. So that was an appropriate response. But look, we need to stand by our guns. We need to be there on the border. We can't allow people illegally enter this country, which is a violation of our laws. They need to do it the right way. We cannot work on their time frame. The president has made it clear, so has the secretary, if they want to claim asylum, go to a port of entry. You have your due process. But if you enter illegally isn't the answer. Entering illegally, it's number one, it's a violation of our laws. You can't want to be a part of the greatest country on earth and not respect our laws. You can't have it both ways.
Yeah, last question. We heard from the Tijuana mayor in Mexico. He's not happy with the situation either. He's blaming his own federal government out of Mexico City for the problems here. You've got a new administration coming into Mexico. Do you think they operate differently with the Trump White House?
Look, I'm hearing rumors of an agreement about staying in Mexico while their asylum cases are being through litigation. I hope that's accurate. I think when this new president comes into power Saturday, we'll get the answer to that question. But I think he understands the situation. I think he'll help us. I really do.
Thank you, sir. It's good to have you back with us today. Thomas Homan, thanks.
Thank you, Tom.
All right, thank you.
We are getting some breaking news on the future of General Motors right now. We're hearing they are slashing jobs. All this as we continue to watch the Dow soaring as we kick off a new week here, up 337
Let's go,
points.
right? More on the trade war with China. Could a deal between Beijing